Live from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the program. Days of Disobedience. Climate change activists get creative to protest government inaction on the environment. Climate hysteria, the anti-climate change message that helped push Finnish populists to second place. Macron's measures, what to expect from the French president's speech as he tries to quell yellow vest anger. French resistance, why not everyone is pleased with an EU decision to open trade talks with Donald Trump. And sock it to him. A look back at our favorite Raw moments from Strasbourg as this season comes to an end. Well, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. Joining us tonight is Heidi Hautala. She is a Finnish MEP with the Greens EFA group and Vice President of the European Parliament. Heidi, which of these stories are you watching very closely tonight?
I love this Extinction Rebellion because it's a positive way to mobilize people to save our planet.
And indeed, quite a lot of people have been mobilized.
Yes.
All right, and also joining us tonight, Arne Gericke. He's a German MEP who sits with the European Conservatives and Reformists group. What about you, Arne?
Yeah, I would also follow up the first subject because I think taking responsibility, covering generations is very important, especially if young people get interested in politics and that they can take influence. I think that is very important.
All right, so both our MEPs are keeping an eye on that, and that is exactly where we will begin. Because with a week, activists' hope will be critical in the fight against climate change. Now, the main message that they have, and they're taking it to the streets, words and scare stories are not enough. And now it is all about civil disobedience. Protests are planned across Europe and around the world. In London, thousands joined the movement entitled Extinction Rebellion, as Heidi was saying, and blockading some of the UK capital's busiest roads and bridges. Now, their rallying cry, unless immediate action is taken, humankind itself faces extinction. And tomorrow, here in Strasbourg, 16-year-old climate activist Greta Thunberg will deliver that warning in person. Now, the Swedish teenager who's become the face of the movement will meet with the EU Parliament President Antonio Tajani and address the Environment Committee. All right, this is, really interesting, and both of you are watching this, especially the fact that people are gathering in different parts of not just Europe, but of the world. There is so much momentum behind this. Why is that the case in terms of climate change? Do you think people just care a lot more these days? I'll start with you, Heidi.
I think a lot changed last autumn when the International Panel on Climate Change published their report. And then that actually led also in my country to a situation where for the first time ever in parliamentary elections there's been a real debate about climate and environment. So I guess it's also that the young generation is telling us that we are wasting away our time if we don't act now, because it's their planet that we are destroying. So it's our generation of decision makers that really has to conduct systemic changes.
I mean, especially with you're talking about young people and Greta Thunberg, that the Swedish teenager, she has become the face of this. And do you think, though, that the timing, the fact that it's very close to European parliamentary elections, that this is a time for politicians to actually just pay lip service? There's every possibility they can take this topic, talk about it, and maybe still not do anything about it.
I think it's more because it shows that we as Europeans not only take care of our village or our city or our region, we have a global responsibility. Climate change hardly really affects Europe itself. It's mostly the islands in the Pacific or the vast desert areas and so, which are very hard, very strongly affected.
That there's some issues that are a bit more immediate than climate change. There's some that probably would argue that.
Yeah, that is. But as I say, if we talk about climate change, it's not really the close matters. It's more far away. But it's also very important to take responsibility in the distance. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, our team in the Cube, they've actually been talking to one of the organizers of this Extinction Rebellion. Alex Morgan is joining us now with more on that. Alex, you got to talk to them. What do they have to say?
Well, good evening, Tessa. Making a difference or just making a lot of noise? Really, when it comes down to today's demonstrations across London, in Brussels as well, other cities, it really depends on who you ask. I want to start, if I might, with this post on Snapchat taken by a passerby. And look at this caption at the top. Don't these people have jobs? The suggestion here that the people on the march on a Monday blocking, this is Oxford Circus here in central London, don't they have jobs? Haven't they got something better to go and do? There is certainly criticism of this march. Well, when it comes to the people on the march themselves, they certainly see themselves as at a tipping point. Let me introduce Russell. He's a marine biologist. He says he was trying to make his way out of London to get to work in Bath. He couldn't, so he went along to the marches. So on that question of, is this just a load of noise? This is what Russell had to say.
To the people that say this is probably going to make a lot of noise, they're not going to make too much difference, I must admit, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in terms of a turnout for an environmental movement that transcends political boundaries. You've got people from all ages, all demographics here.
All ages, all demographics here, a sense of real passion. I spoke to Mike as well. He was down there with his wife, who was helping coordinate filming the videos. And for him, this was more than just making noise. For him, it cuts down to our moral duty to the next generation. This is what Mike had to say.
There's a moral point as well as personal interest. You know, we really do owe it to ourselves, to our families and to the people of this planet, as well as all the wildlife, to do something and change the way we live before it's too late.
The idea we have a moral duty, that people are feeling they need to be there, not just because they're angry, they feel morally obliged. I think certainly in the conversation we're seeing, that may be a new factor coming in. Well, let me introduce you to Kofi. He's one of the event organisers in London. I put this question to him of, surely a few days more climate protests aren't going to change things. And Kofi said to me, this was never about one big demonstration changing everything. For him, it was about mobilising global communities. This is what Kofi had to say to me from central London.
The changes are going to be brought about by masses of people organised independently through citizens' assemblies. For the first time, we have a global movement that is supporting communities of resistance to take power into their own hands.
Taking power into their own hands. Well, there was a controversial moment today, I think, especially with a demonstration that bills itself as peaceful. This was an awkward moment. Look at this. Damage to the Shell building. Metropolitan Police saying at least 3 people arrested in this incident where activists glued themselves to the building, daubed graffiti on it. So I asked for Hannah. She was another one of those attending the march from Extinction Rebellion, the group organising it. I asked her response to these scenes. This is what she had to say.
I just went past the Shell building. There were 2 activists glued, very peacefully. When I went past, I understand that people are frustrated. And the reason why they're frustrated is that big oil companies like Shell knew about the climate change impacts, and they're doing all they can, including funding, even this year, huge amounts of money to delay and obscure climate action.
And that was the sense I got, Tessa, from most of the activists when I asked them about this. They said a few broken windows for a company like Shell, while it's regrettable, it's worth it to make their overall point. Just quickly saying, Shell said in the statement to me they had no comment on these allegations. Rather, they encourage people not to injure themselves or others in incidents like this. So as you can see, the people there, this is day 1. We have at least 2 more days of this latest round of what they're calling civil disobedience, and we'll have all the latest for you in the Cube.
All right. Thank you for that, Alex Morgan and our team in the Cube. I mean, those are obviously voices of the people who were supporting the Extinction Rebellion. But there are people who are bothered by the fact that they are out on the streets. It disrupts their daily lives. And, there was that question posted there. Don't these people have jobs? And it was the same question that we saw when we were covering the youth protest, the student protest. Don't they have to go to school? So what do you say to that? I mean, is this the right way to go about doing this?
I think it's the right way. And I believe that their idea that they would mobilize 3.5% of global population is great, because I actually believe that you don't need to have a majority in the streets to alert the politicians to take the right decisions. And I very much appreciate this idea that they don't want to blame anyone individually for driving a car or eating meat, because we need systemic changes, and that's their aim. So I think this is a great movement, and they should stay in the street and possibly not go to work and school.
Because when you say it is the right way, that is assuming that there is no other way, that there are no alternatives. But surely, I mean, is it because they've run out of ideas or run out of ways? Is it because politicians just simply don't listen? I mean, there's got to be another way.
Yeah, I think it's a sign. Of course, it's easy to say, don't they have to go to school or to work? That's what I would say in the first
So you would say that as well?
I would say as well. But on the same time, giving a second thought, I find it fascinating that we are not stuck in ideologies. We're just stuck, longing for responsibility for our future generations, because that's what we miss if we don't take care of such an important item like climate change, yeah?
Go ahead.
Well, I think we shouldn't depoliticize the aims of this movement. Of course, they want a political change, and there are opponents to this political change. And in that sense, I think Shell is very much responsible for having put this mess together. I wouldn't necessarily advise at all to go and break their windows, but I think it's necessary to also to blame those who are corporate perpetrators of climate change.
Just one to quote one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, he said that troublemakers change the world. So do activists have to be troublemakers to have that change?
Not necessarily. I think you can be disobedient in a non-violent manner, even vis-a-vis property and buildings. I personally I prefer that.
All right. Okay. Well, climate change isn't just being felt on the streets, but we are seeing a lot of people out there today. But it is also having an impact at the polls in Finland. Well, the populist Finns party beat expectations to come in second in elections yesterday with a razor-thin 0.2 percentage point loss to the center-left Social Democrats. And while their message was mostly anti-immigration, the party also campaigned against climate change policies, decrying, quote, climate hysteria of other parties, and arguing that Finland has already done enough. All right, let's bring in our next guest because she has studied populist parties and how they approach climate change policy. We have Stella Schaller. She is the manager of the Climate Change Diplomacy Project at Adelphi, and she's joining us from Berlin. I mean, what we saw in Finland, Stella, is really a really interesting shift and change. So why do you think climate change took center stage and affected the polls, in fact?
So I think the leaders of the Finns party kind of discovered they could mobilize their electorate by casting climate policy as an elite agenda that would hurt ordinary people, which by the way, isn't true because climate is a justice issue and will hit the poor first. But I think that in Finland, most parties really supported the efforts to combat climate change and just competed about different solutions. But the Finns party used the debate as a wedge issue to attract voters who were skeptical of the costs of further action. And I would say that just as the opposition to immigration, the opposition to climate policy really reflects both a strong skepticism against the elites and a rejection of global responsibility and the idea that everything is interconnected.
That's really interesting when you call it a wedge issue and they take advantage of, the skepticism that already exists. So when we broaden it further, because you did a study of about 21 far-right political parties and how they use climate change as well in their discourse, what exactly did you find out?
So we found that there is a risk that climate and sustainability policy more generally will become a new line of conflict in European societies when other topics such as migration lose their political explosiveness and tensions. And we have observed that a lot of right-wing populist parties in Europe that are gaining support that are framing climate policy as an elite agenda and that they are using a type of nationalist, emotional framing to kind of harm the support for ambitious climate policy.
And how do you think this will affect the upcoming European parliamentary elections and also beyond that?
Well, for the upcoming European elections, recent new polls suggest that about 25% of seats will go to Eurosceptic, right-wing and populist parties. And that means that ambitious climate policy will be harder to push through and implement because, a lot of these parties that are gaining support are really fueling fears about increasing energy prices, for example, or fueling fears about transport and heating costs that are often based on false information. And the real risk is really that the parties are attacking the very foundation of ambitious climate policy, that is the capability to cooperate internationally, the acceptance of scientific institutions and scientific evidence.
All right, thank you for your insight there, Stella Schaller, talking to us there from Berlin. I'd like to bring in what she's saying. So as we see people on the streets protesting, asking for action, it seems, as she was saying there, that about 25% of the projection of politicians will probably make it difficult to have ambitious climate change goals pushed through. So politicians will create a wedge, create a problem. So how do you see this, this being used as a political issue, a divisive and emotive issue?
Again, I will come back to what I said in advance. I think climate change can't be seen separate from migration. Migration and climate change belong very close together, because many of the far countries from which the migrants are coming are affected by climate change.
But I mean, this is an issue that politicians will be using, already using, in fact, in terms of getting votes. The elite, pitting the elite versus the working class, when they say, ambitious climate policies are against working class people.
Yeah, but in fact, indeed, this is what we saw in the parliamentary elections in Finland, that this was to somewhat a strongly polarizing issue, because indeed I think the Finns party managed to give this impression that it's only going to cost, and anyway, it's none of our business. We've done our share, which of course is not true. If you look at the consumption levels in our countries, they are super high. So we're really wasting resources and in that sense exacerbating climate change. But I think it is also a situation where we see that, for instance, my Green Party was proportionately speaking, the biggest winner in the elections, because we offer climate change also in terms of opportunities that we need to change, but it can be create new jobs. Finnish businesses are flourishing because they are producing new technologies. And of course the transition has to be just. That is clear. That's also the story from France, from the yellow vests,
exactly.
that it has to be just.
Exactly, and I think what's interesting, you have, even in Germany, we saw, the Greens, and then you have the AfD.
Exactly, we had
questioning
exactly
the science
the same.
behind climate
We had
change.
exactly the same.
Exactly. Is this the new long term, though? Is this when you have, who is owning the narrative? You have the Greens on the one hand, and you have, more populist, far-right groups that would take it the other direction. Who is owning this narrative when it comes to climate change? Would you like to answer?
I think I'm quite impressed that not only the Greens have taken this subject very serious, but it's other...
like the AfD in Germany, which we have seen, but on the opposite end.
Yeah, and they are all taking over also this normally green subject and making points with it. Yeah, so they also get a lot of votes on this subject.
But I know you're from the Greens, but honestly speaking, who do you think is owning the narrative on climate policy?
I think the positive narrative for the future is very much owned by environmental groups, civil society, and the Greens very much adhere to that. There are other political parties that are on that line as well, and I'm very hopeful that the European left, the progressive parties...
But it is becoming as emotive as immigration.
Oh yeah. No, I think to own the climate story means that we have to bring alternatives. How should we change our lifestyles and our consumption and production patterns? It's a systemic issue, and it needs a lot of knowledge, of course. But I think it's a bit unfair to say that climate change, yes, it's connected with migration. It is, but at least in my country, we see very little support by the Finns party to developing cooperation, which would be to help people to live where they live in Africa or elsewhere, so that they wouldn't need to migrate. So there's a bit of a double standard. It's a very bad narrative.
It's really one of the issues that will play a main role in the upcoming elections.
Yes.
And indeed, as we get closer to election day, two prominent Eurosceptics are launching their campaigns. Now that story and a lot more in tonight's Ballot Buzz. Strasbourg, a city once again throwing open its doors to EU lawmakers, but for the last time before they face the people's judgment in May's elections. Among those vying for votes, Rassemblement National leader Marine Le Pen is not expected to push the Frexit button just yet. The bigger question may be, will anyone back at home be listening? 42% of French people aren't even interested in the elections, according to polling by the BVA Institute. Meanwhile, across the channel, these patriotic socks can only mean one thing. Nigel Farage is back in campaign mode. With Britain now likely to take part in the European elections, he has launched the imaginatively named Brexit Party.
Now we face European elections. The establishment is now panicking.
And the first poll is out in the UK since Theresa May delayed Brexit and announced British MPs will likely participate in EU elections. It shows the Conservative 8 points behind Labour. Nigel Farage's Brexit Party is just 1 point behind the Tories in third place. And UKIP coming in fourth at 14%. With Tory support falling to its lowest level since 2013, and the two Brexiteer parties polling with a combined 29%. All right, we saw there 42% of French people don't really care about the European elections. Are you worried? How worried are you about apathy in the upcoming elections?
It's a big concern. For instance, in my country, only 10% of young people between 18 and 24 vote in the European elections. We still have 6 weeks to change that. But young people should be told that the European Union can be a real driving force for many positive future scenarios, such as combating climate change and fighting blind globalization, which is destroying jobs. So we still have time to do that.
6
and
weeks.
We'll
Are
be
you
in the
worried
streets.
about apathy amongst voters?
I'm just thinking about the last film we saw on Britain, and I think it was the young people who were more willing to change things. And I think that we will be pretty surprised on coming up changes on the European election, just seeing how young people are very much busy and
part of it. I mean,
busy on climate change.
And
it shows
indeed,
that they are not just watching.
As Heidi was saying, 6 weeks to go. Politicians have their work cut out for them, definitely. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, trade tensions, why France tried to block trade talks between Brussels and Washington. Plus, we also have French citizens who have been clear they want lower income taxes. But is Emmanuel Macron prepared to give it to them? We look ahead to the results of his Grand Débat next.
Président, je suis médecin et pourtant vous voyez un gilet jaune à mes pieds.
On est un pays où on a laissé trop s'installer la conflictualité.
Bonjour Monsieur le Président et bienvenue dans les Alpes d'Haute-Provence.
Moi je prends un engagement solennel devant vous, c'est que moi j'en tirerai des conséquences véritables.
All right, welcome back to Raw Politics. So a look at the French President Emmanuel Macron's trailer ahead of tonight's televised address to the nation. Now, as part of his Grand Débat, the president has spent the last few months attending town hall meetings, listening to complaints and sifting through letters and questionnaires. Now, this is all in response to the Yellow Vest protest, now in its 22nd week. Now, Macron's goal is to transform anger into solutions, he says, but the anger still rages on. What began as a response to rising fuel taxes, the protests have put taxation high on the national agenda. All right, for more on this, let's cross over to our correspondent in Paris, Annelise Borges. Annelise, so, you know, we know the broad strokes of what Emmanuel Macron is about to offer, but what can we expect from his address to the nation tonight?
Well, Tessa, according to Emmanuel Macron's staff, the French president will deliver a, quote, powerful and concrete answer to what's been described as the biggest challenge his administration has faced so far. The Élysée Palace has been very secretive about this address, but they have been saying that sources close to the president at least have been saying that Emmanuel Macron will announce a series of measures that have been decided upon following this grand national debate, this unprecedented public consultation that was launched by the French president in response to the Yellow Vest crisis. And as you said, he took to Twitter to talk about transforming anger into to solutions and announcing powerful changes. Just what these powerful changes will be, well, this announcement later today is expected to touch on purchasing power and, of course, taxation. And that could, of course, please some 82% of French voters who, according to a poll published this weekend, would like to pay less taxes. 88% of French voters who would like to see a revision of the pension system here in this country. Well, will Emmanuel Macron please them? Will he deliver? How far will he go? Those are the questions, of course. He is promising profound changes, but will these profound changes then have a profound impact on his drive to transform this country, to deliver a different France? That is what people will be watching for, expecting answers about this evening at 8 p.m. local time.
All right, thank you for that. Annelise Borges talking to us from Paris. And joining me to discuss this is French MEP from the Socialists and Democrats, Christine Revaud-Dallon-Bonnefoy, and Finnish MEP from the European People's Party, Sirpa Pietikäinen. Yeah. All right, let's start with you, Christine, because we've talked about the Yellow Vest protest before, and tonight Emmanuel Macron will deliver, as Annelise was saying, powerful and concrete are the words that are the expectations tonight. Do you think that after Emmanuel Macron's speech tonight, we will see a different France?
We will see a difference if he has correctly listened to the people in the Grand Débat and also the Yellow Vest movements. They were all talking about we want tax justice. Tax justice. Not we don't want to decrease
lower
the
taxes.
tax. No, tax justice. Because I've been here a few times and always I was talking about the wealth tax. We used to have taxes on big fortunes in France. And he decided at the beginning of his mandate to let down these proposals. And now it is completely unfair because the smaller income have to pay some taxes, but the richest doesn't have to. And this is where it's justice, tax justice.
But it does
and
say
to say we are going to decrease the taxes, it's not the answer everyone is waiting for. And we still want to have public services. If you don't have any more state budget because you don't have any more tax income, you won't have public services.
So you think that by lowering taxes, that doesn't answer the question?
The answer is
fix the problem?
This answer is a liberal answer, but it's not what the Yellow Vest and what was said during the Grand Débat.
And as Christine, I'll ask you, Sirpa, because as Christine was saying, and social welfare is a big issue in Finland as well. But as Christine was saying, the French, they want tax justice or lower taxes. Some would interpret that,
no,
but at the same time, more spending, and better benefits from it. So how does this is being called the French riddle? How do you see that?
Well, of course, if you individually ask any of us asking, would you like to pay more taxes, we would say no, of course. If it is possible not to pay, I would prefer that. But then if you look the balance, you need the taxation to establish that kind of a common insurance society so that you get free education, so that you get good quality healthcare for everybody, so that you get adequate services, and all that. Then the another aspect is this, what you mentioned about tax justice. But then again, taxing the rich actually doesn't bring adequate income on the budget by itself to take care. So everybody of us needs to pay taxes. Then the second debate that is going on is, of course, what do you tax? And then if you could tax more the consumption and on businesses, environmentally harmful activities, that would be wiser than just taxing the income.
I just want to pick up on what you said that, if we had a chance to not pay taxes, we probably would say, that's great. But actually, when we look at some countries, they do want to pay taxes. If you look at the Danes, even in Finland, I think there is a willingness to pay in the context of redistribution.
Yes. It is called, as you said, fair distribution. It is a question. If you ask people, do you want to pay taxes, they say no. But if you ask, would you prefer to pay more taxes and to have a better welfare society. They say yes, they would like to pay more taxes.
For the French to see from other countries.
The French are not against paying taxes.
Okay.
They just want that these taxes to be fair. This is not the case now. So when I heard this poll saying 88% of the French doesn't want to pay taxes anymore, this is wrong, because they still want free school, they still want to have a public hospital, and etc., etc. But they don't understand why it's always the same who has to pay, and the fact that the pensioners, they have the taxes were increased on their small income, and they saw some people who are really rich who doesn't have to pay taxes anymore. So this is the fact that it is not fair today. And what I'm waiting for, but I know that Emmanuel Macron won't deliver this, it's to say, I will put back the wealth tax.
So if you say, so basically you're saying that tonight France is not going to get any tax justice.
No, it won't be justice. It will be very easy to say you will have your income taxes decreasing. Mm-hmm. So we know what it will be after that. It means that we will have less free public school, we will have less hospitals, and these days a lot of hospitals are closing because of budget going down.
Sure.
So it's very, very preoccupying.
You choose one or the other. Yes, Sirpa, you wanted to add.
And this is not only a French dilemma,
sure,
it is a European dilemma, that if it is a competition towards the bottom, if all of us are trying to compete only on the public expenditures costs and lowering the taxes, for example, for businesses. And that's why I think it would be so important in European level in the longer run, not to have only the common corporate tax base, but to have at least the lowest level for that. Because otherwise we can't sustain the welfare societies.
Sure. And very quickly, before we go, is this, as climate change we were talking about in the previous panel, has become an election issue, do you think taxation is going to become an election issue for the upcoming
I hope so, but fair tax justice is really important. And I'm also in favor of European taxation, to be fair and to be sure that everywhere we are all redistributing the riches.
You're in favor of Euro taxation
yes,
as well?
Of course.
At least it should be a big topic and issue, not only now, but within the 5 years, to have at least some basic level on the Europe, and to recognize and to be proud of our taxation system, and to be recognized and to be proud of our welfare societies and education systems.
We will get all the details of Emmanuel Macron's speech very soon. All right, coming up on Raw Politics for you, does Europe need more border guards? MEPs are set to vote on plans to give the EU frontier agency 10,000 more, just as the Mediterranean migration crisis subsides. That is after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. So the European Union has finally given the go-ahead for formal trade talks to begin with the United States. A majority of member states approved the mandates, with the exception of France, which voted against, and Belgium, which abstained. Now, the move means that the pair can officially begin transatlantic negotiations, and it comes after months of threats from both sides. The EU's trade commissioner said the bloc is ready as soon as they are.
The European member states have this morning given their green light to the European Commission to open negotiations for a limited trade agreement with the United States. And I welcome this decision wholeheartedly. We are now ready to move ahead into the next phase of EU-US relations.
And joining us to talk about this is William Dartmouth, a British MEP with the Europe Freedom and Direct Democracy Group. And also joining us, Ralph Packett, a Belgian MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist Group. All right, let's start first with the fact that the trade negotiations is going to start, William, because just last week we were talking about tit-for-tat tariffs, trade tariffs, and does it seem like maybe Donald Trump got his way in the end?
Well, look, it's obviously a very good thing that they're talking about trade. But I have to point out the inconvenient fact that that the European Union and the United States negotiated for about 3 years during the period of the Obama presidency, and it didn't get anywhere. And in my view, this is a complete fantasy from the Trade Commissioner, who yet again and trying to justify the last 3 months. The idea that 3 years under the Obama administration, it didn't get anywhere, that suddenly with 3 months under the Trump administration, which is much more protectionist, rightly or wrongly, which is a different discussion, that everything is magically going to change is just a fantasy. It's just a fantasy.
So what do you think? You mean this is not going to go anywhere?
This isn't going to get anywhere.
So what is this?
And that's even leaving aside
leaving
aside the fact that France is opposed to it. As everybody in the EU knows, and unfortunately humble people like us know, in the UK and Belgium, what France says goes. So I mean, France has already voted against it. So this is simply a device on the part of the Commissioner in order to justify the last 3 months of the term.
What do you think, Ralph?
Well,
and Belgium having abstained as well. Huh?
Well, to explain that, I need to quickly show you the situation in Belgium. You know, we are a combination of two very different peoples. In the north, we have the Flemish people. Sure. We are very dependent of export. We are accountable for 80% of the Belgian export, and we were very in favor of starting these negotiations. In the south, we have the French-speaking people, and they're more aligned with France, of course. So one is for, the other one is against, and we had to abstain, which is a pity.
But if this is happening in one country, in Belgium, you have the Flemish and the Walloons not agreeing on how to discuss trade policy with the United States. What hope do we have of 27 countries after, well, the UK negotiating a trade deal?
I understood that France was against it on the climate issues.
Sure,
but I'm sure we can convince France that the only way to improve climate change, to face these challenges, is to look for partners and to bring our innovation and bring our technology all over the whole world, because Europe alone is only accountable for almost 10% of carbon emission, and we can't do this on our own. We need to tackle this on a global level, and therefore we need to approach other partners, such as the Americans.
I mean, it's not just the climate change issue. We're talking about trade objectives.
Yes.
Trade objectives. If trade objectives are so different among countries, how is it even possible to have this trade deal as a bloc?
Well, it's always been very difficult for the European Union to make trade agreements, precisely because, as you said, with great skill and clarity. Well, just let me the point. I'm just making your own point, if I may. You said with great clarity, because you've got to get 27 people to agree, and that's very difficult with 27 different economies, and that is why the European Union has been a country like Singapore. The city-state of Singapore has trade agreements with the United States and has a trade agreement with China, whereas the European Union doesn't. Now, one of the reasons for that is precisely, as you said with great clarity yourself, I'm trying to praise you actually, that it's very difficult to get 27 countries to agree. Now, already on this, we've already heard that France is opposed. I don't want to labour the point. France is opposed, and Belgium, but it only needs the Canada trade agreement, which took them 8 years to negotiate, which was with a much simpler economy, was actually blocked by the parliament in Wallonia. Well, you know there's a parliament in Wallonia, but most people in Europe don't even know that.
True, and we shouldn't go there to waste our time and to lose ourselves in endless hesitation. That's for sure. But I heard promising signals from the American side. I saw the American ambassador last week, and they clearly stated that they were prepared to start from a clean slate. But I totally agree that we shouldn't go to America to waste our time without a clear plan. But the position of Europe should be a strong one. We are the biggest economy. We are the biggest global trading bloc, and we need to act like it with confidence and with a very assertive attitude. And if we do that, I'm sure we can reach agreements.
All right, well, there you go. There is a lot more actually happening here in Strasbourg. And in fact, this is the last session of this parliamentary term before the European elections. So let us take a look at what else is on the agenda. MEPs may now be focused on the elections, but there's still work to do. Social media firms are under increasing pressure to take down illegal content, and MEPs could be about to pile on even more as they vote on new rules to force internet companies to remove terrorist content within an hour of receiving an order from the authorities. On Wednesday, the Latvian Prime Minister rolls into town. It's his turn to share his vision for the future of Europe with MEPs. Better late than never. As the Mediterranean migration crisis subsides, MEPs will vote on plans to give the EU Frontier Agency a standing corps of 10,000 border guards by 2027. And in case you thought you could escape it, Strasbourg will once again feature a Brexit debate. MEPs will discuss last week's European Council summit, which saw the UK given an extension until the end of October. I want to focus on one of those topics there. Does the EU really need 10,000 border guards, so considering that the migration crisis is subsiding?
Well, the past years there was a complete absence of European immigration policy. The only solution European leaders had was to make illegal immigration legal and to have completely open borders. And we saw that only led to a major immigration crisis.
But the numbers are down now. I mean, it's not a crisis.
There are steps being taken, but this should be go together with strong signals that illegal immigration towards Europe will not have any chance like immigrants who come through illegal ways won't have any chance to have asylum. We need to be humane and we need to protect people, but we can do that in the safe countries outside the European borders.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. But coming up on Raw Politics, we have heard what French citizens want, lower income taxes. But what about you? Do you think you pay too much tax? Your call is coming up at 7 p.m. after the show. The contact information is on your screen. Call us at 00800 3333 7002. Join us in the debate and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Our lines are opening soon, and that's after the break.
Have yours say, you know what to do, pick up the phone, it's free.
I think Assange is an honest person. He had the courage of his fellow victims to speak the truth about a lot of things, and they didn't like it.
It's a good thing that it's regulated, they even pay taxes.
We are assuming that those women are actually doing it because they want, not because of the social context.
You're not going to stop it, so the better thing to do is to regulate it.
It makes no difference because it's in the same situation as before, so what's the point of another election?
That was just some of the highlights from the last episode of Raw Politics, Your Call last week. And tonight, we're doing it all over again. I'll be hosting that Your Call after the show, and here is what we will be talking about. The French government has been hyping it up. And tonight, we'll get the results. The conclusions of Emmanuel Macron's Grand Débat, 10 weeks of debates with citizens as a way to quell Yellow Vest protests. One thing is clear, the French want lower income taxes. 82% of them, according to a new poll. But what about you across Europe? Do you pay too much tax? Ahead of federal elections over the weekend, almost all of Finland's political parties competed with each other over ambitious climate change goals. All except the populist True Finns party. It says aggressive climate change policies are an elitist approach that hurts the working class. Ahead of May's European elections, we want to know, is climate change influencing your vote? And when it comes to action on climate change, could it come to a tipping point this week? Campaign group Extinction Rebellion thinks so. It's calling for civil disobedience in 80 cities across 33 countries over the coming days. The group's founder says troublemakers change the world and wants to get as many protesters arrested as possible. But what do you think? Does civil disobedience work? We want to hear from you on all of our 3 topics. Do you pay too much tax? Is climate change influencing your vote? Does civil disobedience work? All right, all of the contact information is on your screen now. You can call us for free. The number is 00800 3333 7002. Send an email to rawpoll@euronews.com or look for us on social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics or look for us on Skype. All right, joining us here and is William Dartmouth, a British MEP with the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy Group, and also Francis Zamet-Dimek, a Maltese MEP with the European People's Party. All right, I'd like to ask you, since you're both politicians, do you think civil disobedience works? And does it get politicians listening, civil disobedience?
Well, if you look at the historical precedents for civil disobedience, you can think of Mahatma Gandhi, who certainly had to use civil disobedience to drive the point home that India required independence, civil disobedience with regard to the salt mines. If you go back even a bit more recently, the case of Martin Luther King in the United States of America. And civil disobedience certainly worked there because it led to equality.
Yellow vest protests in
France.
Well,
the yellow vest is another form of civil disobedience. Sometimes democracy would also lead you to have to adopt different kind of measures to drive the point home.
All right, what do you think, William? Do you agree?
Well, I think we've got to see, I mean, the big civil disobedience in Europe, as you just said, I seem to be quoting you all the time, are the Gilets jaunes.
Sure.
So let's see to what extent that's really going to work. Now the French government's reaction has been to basically pretty much break it up and send in the riot.
Well, what about today? What's happening today? Lots of people are going out to the streets around, not just Europe, around the world on, climate change.
There's a degree of civil disobedience in London happening today.
Absolutely, not in Brussels as well, just to get politicians to listen because they said there's inaction on climate change.
But I've got to disagree with this. There's constant action on climate change.
Well,
it's all we ever hear about. Climate change, climate change, climate change.
Well, yes,
there's
because
a complete
it is a big issue, isn't it?
But hang on, there's a near destruction of manufacturing industry in Europe in the cause of climate change.
Aren't you worried about
climate
that?
change, I'm worried about the destruction I'm worried about the loss of jobs and the destruction of manufacturing industry. I'm very, very worried about that. And that never gets any airtime at all, except now. Thank you very much.
Well, I think the people who are protesting about climate change are, again, signifying to the world that this is a real serious issue. I think we only need to have a look at the famous new book by David Wallace Wells, The Uninhabitable Earth, and he kicks off that book by saying it is worse, much worse than you think.
Yeah, but even for a noble cause, if those who are supporting this would say it's a noble cause, wouldn't this being disruptive, is that productive, counterproductive?
It all depends on whether the normal tools of communication work or not. Because so much has been said about climate change and so little has been done. And now we are talking of an emergency situation. This can lead to much more of a refugee situation. This can lead to devastation on agricultural products. So this can lead to even lack of basic resources that we need.
What about you? Who do you agree with? Do you agree with William or do you agree with Francis? Do join us. Let us know what you think. Answer the 3 questions that we asked you earlier in the program. And here is the contact information. Call us. It's free. It's 00800 3333 7002. Email at rawpoll@euronews.com. And social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. I'm already waiting for your comments there. And you can search for us on Skype as well. Okay. As usual, it is time for tonight's Raw Moment. And as you mentioned, it is the last Strasbourg week of this parliamentary session. And what a run it has been. So all of this week, we are revisiting some of our favorite Raw Moments from the so-called traveling circus. That's what they call us coming all the way to Strasbourg here. Beginning with a gift delivered from Nigel Farage to Jean-Claude Juncker last September. Do either of you remember what was in that box?
No.
It was a pair of socks with a Union Jack. With a Union Jack on it.
Yeah.
So
okay. You've got to give me an idea tonight.
Are you...
But actually, Nigel and Mr. Juncker get on personally rather well.
They do. Are you looking forward to seeing Nigel Farage back here at the Parliament?
Well, I won't be here, but I'll be looking forward to seeing you on television, yes.
And
well, I mean, he's now formed the Brexit Party, and to me, that's a bit of a contradiction. He forms the Brexit Party, but it's another way to get back here. So
I can't agree with that because we have Scottish nationalists. We have Scottish nationalists, Welsh nationalists, and Irish nationalists in the Westminster Parliament. Nobody ever says that to them.
As we say, we'd love to hear from you. Do join us on your call after the program. Have a good evening and see you very soon.